All right, all right. How you all doing today? We are live again for another episode of This Week in Supervision. It is always a great time to see you all, to speak with you all. I'm going to jump on into the topic. Man, I had an amazing time though, a win on was it last week at the training, the Gulf Shores training. It was awesome. Hello, shout out to all of you all that I saw and spoke with while I was there. It was an amazing experience. But let's get on into what we have for today. All right. And what we have for today, our title is Freud's Defense Mechanisms. All right. Freud's Defense Mechanisms. Um, why we take our anger out on the wrong people, why we take our anger out on the wrong people. We're going to talk about that today. I don't know if you've ever experienced a situation to where somebody just snaps off at you and you're like, golly, what's going on? I just said hello. Um, what's going on there? And so a lot of times there are some things behind it that we have to study and look at, especially in the behavioral health, behavioral science field. We need to know why this happens, don't we? All right. And so we're going to talk about a little bit of that. But just before we get into that, I do want to show you or start with some test questions. All right. For those of you all who are preparing for the exam, or for some of those of you who um, who are doing providing supervision and just looking for ideas, this is a great place to start if you would like to take a look at what we have here. And so we're going to start off. What I like to do when I'm working with my supervisees is kind of mix some of the questions that I create. Sometimes I look at Pocket Prep. They have free questions, and we give them their credit for that. And then I create my own questions as well. And we'll probably have a mix of this. I can't remember everything because we got a lot to cover. But in our group, we covered a combination of questions. And so we're going to start off with this question here and see if you can find the answer. If you know the answer, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to try to share my screen. Here we go. And see if you know the answer to this question. All right, here we go. Okay, so we have a social worker. A social worker meets with a client who is concerned about frequently leaving tasks unfinished. The behavior has resulted in family conflict and job loss. To further assess this behavior, what should the social worker do next? Okay. Well, a lot of times with the test questions, as we get our supervisees prepared to take the exam, there's things that we need to know. First, next, best. First, next, best. All right. And so we want to help them to study and identify how to follow with these things. Sometimes the answers actually aren't always going to be exactly the way that you would follow up in real time practice, but it's a good guide. Right. So in this situation, we're looking at this question. And so when I read it off, I actually stopped at I said, okay, we have a social worker meets with a client who is concerned about frequently leaving tasks unfinished. This behavior has resulted in family conflict and job loss. So I stopped right there even before I finished the question and asked the group, does anything stand out that we might want to pay attention to here? Okay. Does anything stand out that we might want to pay attention to? Just to give some extra perspective to how we might go about trying to diagnose and assess what's going on. And what I pointed out was that um, often, we have little clues that tell us whether or not someone is struggling with a mental health concern. Okay. And this isn't the end all be all, but if you notice in this question, it says, the behavior has resulted in family conflict and job loss. Okay. So what's that? From the perspective of the DSM, anytime we have changes in social, occupational, and interpersonal concerns, that is enough to raise a yellow, at least, flag, or orange or yellow flag. There may be something going on that we need to deeply look into. Anything that's impacting social, occupational, and interpersonal concerns. I use the example of someone who might have alcohol use disorder or something like that. Now, we've got the different the different metrics and things that we use to identify and diagnose there, right? But also, what we need to go by is how is this impacting them on the job? How is this impacting them in their social interactions? Because if you've ever been around a problem drinker or a someone who has alcohol use problems, formerly known as alcoholic, then you might have noticed that if you ask them about their drinking, many times they don't believe that they have a problem. As a matter of fact, they will tell you, you know what, I don't have a problem. I can stop drinking if I want to. Okay. I can just stop. Well, then why don't you? Okay. All of this trouble that is being caused as a result of your drinking, but you don't stop. But then from a clinical perspective, we just have to look at it like, okay, no, this is problematic. They can't keep a job. They're having problems in their relationship. Okay. This is causing negative impacts in major areas of life. So usually that's a sign, and we discuss that. But to get back to the question, we have A, discuss options that might diminish the behavior. B, explore factors that have contributed to the behavior. C, help the client identify personal strengths for problem solving. Or D, evaluate the client's motivation for changing the behavior. And just to cut it short, what do you all think the answer is? What did you pick? What did you choose? All right. So the answer for this one is explore factors that have contributed to the behavior. We want to explore the factors that's contributed to the behavior before we jump into treatment. All right. Because and let's just go over some things that we look at when we're doing assessment and possible things that we want to consider. So before we go into assessment, and I'm going to skip around on my notes, is what one thing is that we want to examine is what's the frequency, intensity, and duration. Okay, is this something that is somewhat situational? Did it just randomly occur? Or has this something, or is this something that has been happening all along? Okay. And so that's going to help us to determine if we have maybe an acute or a more chronic situation here, or if it's something that's more short term. And I may get into that a little bit more as we go. All right. So that's what we want to know. When did this start? When did the symptoms start? What brought them on? Okay. And so those are some of the things we're going to study. But then we also want to be thinking of, you know, just as I just randomly think of things that might place with this, if you were to think of right now some of the diagnosis that might align with just, and we don't have enough information, but with the symptoms that we're seeing, what are some of the things that you might look at ruling out as far as diagnosis? And so we'll go over that right now. One of the things, of course, that I would be considering is possible ADHD. Of course, that was at the top of my list. It is at the top of my list. ADHD, right? Because often when things happen, we can start to lose focus when we have ADHD. Stress can also increase these symptoms, right? But difficulty finishing tasks, difficulty focusing, that may be a concern. But we have to really be able to gauge that and separate symptoms of ADHD versus symptoms of maybe a generalized or more focused anxiety. Okay, so we have to use our skills to determine that. So we have ADHD. How about depression? Yes. Depression can, with someone who has depression, we can see low motivation, so they may not be completing tasks. Um, we start to have symptoms of anhedonia. Okay. A means without pleasure. Okay. So we may start to not participate in some of the things that we normally would participate in. And then with that whole change, it may start affecting and impacting the way that we perform, as far as how social we want to be, and also maybe how we complete tasks. And we may have poor concentration, things of that nature. How about, like I was mentioning earlier, an anxiety disorder? And there are a number of anxiety disorders where this can show up. These types of symptoms can show up. But chronic worry can cause procrastination, believe it or not. Okay. Just think about it. Someone who has anxiety may just be so lit with that anxiety that it's hard for them to focus on anything that seems like it's going to be a stressor, i.e., work. All right. And so then we have executive function problems, adjustment disorder, substance use, and what have you. I better move on because there is a quick video that I do want to show you. And so we want to be able to determine if this is situational or chronic, and a lot of times that can be determined by the length of time that we've experienced symptoms. So if it's been 6 months or longer, it's more likely to be chronic. If it hasn't been, then that would be something that a recent situation, a recent occurrence of symptoms may be situational. Okay. All right. So we want to step into something else that we were looking at, right? We wanted to be able to help our supervisees to distinguish some of the fundamental things that might actually be on the exam. And that's things about Freud, because Freud is considered the father of psychology. All right. And so we need to be familiar with the functions of the id, ego, superego, but not just from the standpoint of naming it, but also seeing it in situations. So let's see if we can share this video. I'm gonna stop the share and make sure that my volume is connected when I share this. And let's get into this video. It's kind of unique, but it gets the point across. Um, let's take a look here, and we're not gonna watch the whole video. Just a snippet here.
This is what I've discovered. There is the self we think we are, the self that attempts to deal with the outside world of reality. This self I call the ego. But ego is never the master of self, for we are constantly bedeviled by powerful unconscious forces in our beings. Before ego developed in us, there was id. Id. Id is all that is primitive and infantile within us. Id is the blind instincts of sexual desire and aggression. Id is opposed by another force that I call superego. Superego is rigid, punishing, and repressive, an inheritance from the repression of our parents and the restrictions that are part of the society we grow up in. So I found there are three distinct elements in our personalities. Ego, who deals with the world of reality, but who is also constantly affected by the demands of id and superego.
Just what do you mean you're not sure, David? Either you've got a firm commitment from Robertson or you haven't. Now, which is it? I happen to be in the position where I've got to know.
Well, Mr. Cooper, I'm certain he made a commitment. He didn't give anything in writing.
Oh, he didn't give you anything in writing. All those
Smash
things
him.
you get in writing.
I'll smash him.
Contract.
I'll kill you, Father.
You must honor Father.
Yes.
And they can bring me back firm commitments. Now, don't interrupt me when I'm telling you how...
Your father is a good man, David. Everyone knows that.
Pick up the telephone.
Honor thy father. Honor thy father. Honor thy father.
I hate him. I hate him.
Honor thy father. Honor thy father, or you will be punished.
He stole Mummy away from me. I'm taking your mother away on a holiday, David. I hate him. I'll kill him. Oh, I love him. Mr. Cooper, I'll go and see Mr. Robertson again. Thank you for letting me explain.
David's hate for Mr. Cooper is based on unconscious hate of his own father, caused by childhood jealousy, by the Oedipus complex. Freud said that without insight into these dark forces, we are doomed to play out our lives in an endless dramatization of our childhood relations with our parents.
All right, we're gonna stop it there. We're gonna stop it there. All right. Let's see here. So, um, what we did was make sure that supervisees understand the difference between the id, ego, and superego, because that very well can be on the exam. But we also need to know that I just think it's essential to know as far as practice, because as you could see in that situation, I see this all the time, is that when there are unresolved childhood experiences, there's especially trauma. Okay, then this reoccurs and it shows up in different relationships. It can show up in the therapy room. It can show up in the therapy room with the therapist as you are experiencing, exchange of transferences and counter transferences between you and your client. Okay, but it can also show up in relationships as well, as we see the exchanges. Is this guy is firm. He speaks firm, and it reminds. We're gonna. I think you may have had another name, but we're going to name him Clay. All right. It can make Clay become dysregulated because maybe the sound and the cadence and the firmness that he's hearing from his boss reminds him of childhood experiences with his father, from whom he did not have a close knit relationship with or was not well attached. Okay, so Clay has to use his skills to not become dysregulated and maybe work in therapy to resolve those concerns that are causing him to be disrupted by, you know, someone who just may be trying to do their job, or someone who might be a little bit out of place, but not enough for Clay to be dysregulated and possibly risk losing his job. This is what we work out in the therapy room, right? And so I led with another. I'm heavy Freud. I led with another test prep question concerning the defenses. Okay, and we're going to bring this up to the screen and see if you could take a guess at it. So we have Clay has unresolved anger towards his father, but has never expressed it directly. So one day at work, Clay's employer approaches him about the job performance and speaks in a very commanding tone. Clay suddenly becomes very angry with his employer, reacts defensively, and is ultimately reprimanded and sent home. According to Freud's theory, which defense mechanism best explains Clay's reaction? Clay got dysregulated, and it wasn't necessarily because of the actions of his boss, but more about unresolved concerns with his childhood and his parents. This is what I talk about, what I try to help my supervisees to learn about as they are engaging in psychotherapy with clients. Like, again, the more peace that we have with these situations that we've experienced as far as trauma in the home, the less likely we are to be disrupted. People that you see that are constantly in conflict and arguments with others, and they can't seem to function and communicate well, they learn that at home. And so when they come in interaction with you, it's something about you, you just minding your business, that triggers them often, because they come to the room sometimes with insecurities and things of that nature. And so, according to the Freudian theory, which defense mechanism best explains Clay's reaction? And here we're looking at A, projection; B, displacement; C, reaction. Okay, that's what I'm throwing off. Reaction formation. I'm sorry, I just have to do that now. I'm gonna be bothered. Reaction formation, or D, sublimation. And what do you believe is the answer to this question? All right. And so the question is, the answer, I'm sorry, is B, displacement. Okay, so let me. I'm going to ask you some things, right? I'm going to ask you a few questions, right, about this question, right? So we had the option. One of the options was projection. So, what would be, that wasn't the correct answer. What would be an example of projection occurring in this particular situation? For number one, I try to help my supervisees to understand and know, for one thing, what the wrong answer, if they answer, if they check off the wrong answer, we need to know the definition of that too. What does it mean? So that we don't choose that any longer if it's not the correct answer. So projection, what is projection? Okay. And this is a case where somebody attributes their own feelings or their own attributes, their thoughts of unacceptable behaviors or thoughts. They attribute their own unacceptable thoughts or feelings to you, to another person. Okay. So an example of this is maybe someone feels hostility might accuse, someone who feels hostility might accuse others of being hostile towards them. Or another example is you're dealing with someone who is a liar and they know that they're lying and they start to accuse you of lying. Okay. But they know that they lie all the time. Okay. Projection also is that you feel like you're a loser, and so you're not comfortable with that, but you're constantly calling other people losers, or questioning them, or challenging them as far as their worth and value, right? Okay, so that would be projection. All right. And just to get back into displacement, this is basically going to occur when you have one source. You have an emotional reaction that's redirected from the original source of frustration. So in other words, Clay may have an issue with his dad that's unresolved. And this is where we have certain situations where certain men have issues with men, or certain men have issues with women, and vice versa, or a certain type of personality of a man or woman that you've just got issues with them before they even say anything, okay, because of unresolved concerns that you've had in the past. And so we start shelling that out in therapy. But yeah, so that's displacement. He's got issues with his dad, and that's coming off in the office space. Okay, and then we have reaction formation. What's reaction formation? I call it reaction faking. Okay, and it involves expressing the opposite of one's true feelings, such as, like, if Clay really has an issue with his dad and he just can't stand him, but he's basically having excessive kindness towards his father. That would be an example of uh reaction formation. Sublimation, I don't have a good example from this context from that, but I always look at sublimation as that basically you have unacceptable impulses that you're feeling, and they're redirected to something that is socially accepted. I always think of Mike Tyson. He used to knock out old ladies, snatch off earrings from mothers, or mother with their child, things like that. He was brutal, but as he changed, he was able to redirect some of those negative impulses, the thrill that he would get from doing these things and hurting people, into the ring where it was more socially acceptable, which is not still not a good thing if you understand defenses. It's just a way of dealing with things. You still have to correct those issues. All right. That is pretty much it for today. I do want to inform you all of a training that we have coming up that I would love for you to attend. And that is happening actually very soon. We have a supervisor training that will be coming up on the 23rd and the 24th of this month. So if you have plans on being a supervisor, you want to join this training, check it out, um, and we will definitely get back with you. And then we also have, let's see, we got some stuff here. Um, Hold on one second. All right. And we have a free training that will be hosted by none other than Michael Porterfield. We're excited to have him. And this will be on bilateral stimulation interventions in psychotherapy. So that will be on Tuesday, March 17th. We want to see you there. This is free for individuals who are members of Social Workers of Alabama. Come and check us out. All right. And then we have the DSM-5 TR training that will be on demand, and you can check that out at any time. And then we have also a new training for those who are um, for those who are and this is not populating, but for those who have supervision hours that you're needing, uh, supervision hours meaning that you are a supervisor and you're looking for continuing education to take those 3 CEUs that are required if you are a clinical supervisor. We do have a training for you. It is on demand, and it's called Boundaries Without Burnout. That is 3 CEUs. If you have any questions about that, just hit me up or shoot me a DM, and we'll be sure to get back with you. But thank you so much for joining, and we will see you all again on next week. Take care. All right. Bye bye.